From Acton Town to Wimbledon, from Brixton to beyond. Come love your London with us and sing with us this song. There's no more smog, but we've a vlog to brighten up your day. Come love your London with us from Kew to Haringey. Come out with us and play. Love your London. Have a banana.
Welcome to the first of 4 episodes on Battersea. This is probably the shortest of the 4, as we're going to be talking mainly about the history of the building that this area is perhaps most famous for, the majestic Battersea Power Station. We will also be talking about New Covent Garden Market, explain a little bit about why fruit and vegetables were so important to this area, plus we'll be checking out Nine Elms Market, which technically isn't in Battersea, but we're including Nine Elms in this series as well. But we start our journey at Battersea Power Station. Hello, welcome to a brand new series on Battersea, and by Battersea we are referring to the geographical area of Battersea that is you can see now on your screen. So I know that the constituency of Battersea is quite a lot larger, but we're just going to be talking about the area of Battersea and Nine Elms, which is over there. We've done so much research. In here I have 17,256 words written over 60 pages of notes. Nine Elms and Battersea Power Station, come back to that in a minute, open on the same day, on the 20th of September 2021. And this is the latest station to open on the tube network. It is a tube, it's not a rail, it's not a national rail station. And to get here, you sometimes have to change at Kennington, but normally it's on the Charing Cross branch of the Northern Line, and so this links up to places like Mill Hill East, Edgware, and High Barnet. But the name, Battersea Power Station, there's a bit of a meme on the internet, but it is true. They really should miss the trick by not calling this Battersea Power Station. Everyone talks about Angel Station, Edgware Station, Bank Station. This is Battersea Power Station, and it would have been quite funny if they'd officially called it that, because that is Battersea Power Station. Now we're going to be going in there later. We're going to be talking about the history of that and when it was built, why it was built, how it's still there, which is amazing in itself, and all the different ideas that people had to use it during its derelict years. Again, lots more about that later. This is going to be a history-packed episode, by the way, and I'd like to thank, in particular, I will thank also people at the time, but I definitely want to thank 2 Facebook groups for really helping put this all together, because there's a really great community in Battersea. So thank you to Battersea Pictures and thank you to Love Battersea. 2 fantastic Facebook groups, lots of people there, sort of like we're helping sort of locate things, and even gave us new ideas to research. So, but I'll mention them when we get there. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about this station. It is in Zone 1, which is quite surprising because a lot of the stations around here are in Zone 2. But I think they did that just to sort of like to make this area a little bit more attractive, and it is very attractive now. What didn't always used to be. Again, we'll be talking about that later when we talk about things like Up the Junction. That won't be in this episode. And it's in Zone 1, it's on the Northern Line, as I said. Being a brand new station, as you can imagine, it is perfectly accessible. By the way, I absolutely love this canopy. It was nominated for an architectural prize. It didn't actually win, but yeah, it was nominated. And it's really nice. It's really nice, I like it. But anyway, so now we're going to make our way towards the power station, and we're going to talk about. We see it a lot better really from the other side, from the riverside. But we're first of all going to head to a little jetty just near opposite.
A jetty.
Yeah, yes, it's called the Coaling Jetty, and I think that probably gives you an idea what it was used for. It was used to bring coal to London, and obviously this being a power station, it used a lot of coal. The Coaling Jetty is now one of many areas of London near the Thames which have been converted to like a place for people to relax by the river. But it's quite a famous jetty. It's grade 2 star listed. It was built between 1929 and 1932. It was decommissioned in 1983, which is actually when one part of the power station was also decommissioned. So, and 110 metres is just slightly taller than 103 metres that those chimneys over there measure. So, yeah, it gives you a good idea of how long this jetty is. Let's go and talk there. It's a nice place to talk about the history. Okay, so this is the Coaling Jetty. It's wobbly. And just over there you've got the Clipper boat, the Uber Thames Clipper. So if you want to do commute to work, if you lived around here in these apartments and you wanted to commute to work over there, or vice versa, because this is quite a big business area as well now. If you live somewhere else and wanted to commute here, then that would be where you'd get off, at the Battersea Power Station jetty over there. This Coaling Jetty is actually grade 2 star listed, and as I said, it was to bring coal to power this beast over here. So I'm now going to tell you a little bit about this beast, about this quite beautiful beast and its history. It's Art Deco, obviously, as you can see, it's actually two power stations that were built at separate times. That one over there on the west side, that's number A, and the one on the east side, which is on the left of your picture, that is Station B, and they were opened in 1929 and 1935 respectively. In fact, Station B, the one on the left-hand side, they started, I said, in 1937, but they stopped construction of it during the war, and the construction started again on that particular side of it in 1945, after the war ended. Now, at the times it was built, it was Europe's largest brick building, over 4 million bricks, and it was designed by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott, who incidentally also designed the iconic red telephone boxes that we see everywhere. Not as many as we used to see, unfortunately. They're now these glass things, and probably telephone boxes will end up being a thing of the past. Funnily enough, the two power stations were decommissioned in the same order, A in 1975 and B in 1983. If it weren't for its grade 2 star listed status, it probably would have been torn down, so thank goodness it was listed. But the thing is, no one really knew what to do with it, so from 1983 onwards it began to become very slowly more and more derelict, which it gave it its sort of like its eeriness. I mean, on your screen now I'm going to be you can see some photospheres that were taken before this whole thing was rebuilt. You can see all the people there in the middle of the in the middle of the Battersea Power Station with that open roof. It's a shame in a way that it wasn't left to gracefully become more and more derelict. In fact, the very funny British author and wit Will Self himself suggested something I'm quite fond of. And I'm just going to read this now to you from his opinion piece from the London Review of Books, which he wrote in 2013, verbatim, because I love his way with words. But what, people needle me, would you do with the Battersea Power Station site, given that you so strenuously object to its being turned into shiny happy flats for shiny rich people? The answer is, of course, nothing. Just make the structure safe enough for people to walk around and admire it for the Ozymandian monument to Butskellism that it is. Or, failing that, raze it to the ground and build the social housing so desperately needed by less affluent Londoners. But there is a vanishingly small chance of either of those outcomes. Why, as you'll as likely see, a giant pink pig flying between those 4 iconic chimneys. Now that actually brings us on very neatly to something that this power station is really, really famous for. Pink Floyd's album Animals, and you see it on your cover there. You can see this at the power station with this little pink pig in the middle. That's an inflatable pig that they put, obviously it was, these days you just use AI, wouldn't you, but that is the proper inflatable pig that they put up to make the cover. But the weather was awful, so they took some photographs, but the pig ended up becoming loose and flying into some farmer's farm, who got really, really angry because the pig had worried his cows. But they managed to rescue the pig, bring it back tied it back onto the power station, took some more photos, but in the end they superimposed the photos of the power station are in fact from the first day before the pig flew off, and then the pig was added on the third day when the pig was reattached. So they used sort of like a composite of two photos. When the pig was because we were on the Heathrow flight path, so when the pig was flying across London, all the planes had to be cancelled. Of course, got attacked by midges. All the planes had to be cancelled as well, because obviously it was a risk to the aeroplanes. Now, so the power station has appeared in many movies over the years. There's too many to mention here, but I will mention that Control Room B, that's the one on the eastern side of the power station up there, that appeared not just in the Beatles movie Help, but it's also the inside of it is also on the cover of Hawkwind's 1977 album Quark, Strangeness and Charm, and you can actually get all of these things I've talked about via our affiliate link on Amazon. It's another way of supporting the channel. But look at, I mean, the research we do is so great. If you can really pay us back by sharing these videos on your social media, subscribing to our channel, and remember to hit the notification bell so that you get notifications whenever we produce new episodes. There's going to be at least 4 episodes on Battersea, and also you can become a patron if you want via Patreon. But the main thing is comment and share and subscribe. So a lot of people don't actually realise this, but those chimneys aren't in fact the original chimneys. They were replaced in 2015 using 680 tonnes of concrete, rebuilt using exactly the same construction techniques, and they have to be repainted every year using 375 litres of paint per year. Now, the fact that it's there at all is absolutely the fact it's there at all is absolutely amazing, because obviously this was there during the war, it's quite fortuitous that in fact the reason probably it's still there, the Luftwaffe didn't raise it to the ground, is because the pilots were using it as a navigational method in order to work out where to go in London, because it was such a large landmark. Now, had they raised it to the ground, that would have probably, well, it would have certainly put the moved the war slightly more in the other side's favour, because obviously it powered London. We don't actually know for sure whether the Germans use it as a navigational aid. We know that the British did. We have to assume that they did, because they surely knew what it was, but maybe they didn't. Maybe it's just lucky that it wasn't bombed at all. Another possible reason why it's still there is perhaps Hitler decided that he wanted to maybe, because it's quite sort of like authoritarian looking, isn't it? So maybe he thought that maybe were he to win the war, then he would have used this as some kind of headquarters or whatever. But that's just a possible suggestion. Most people think it was there because it was a navigational aid. As I said, this became derelict. It's now a shopping centre. A lot of people don't like it, to be honest. A lot of people moan about the shops in there. They're not sort of very imaginative. You've got the Zara's, you've got the Tony and Guy's, but a lot of people, a lot of the locals don't really like it very much. And also it's obviously got luxury flats, as always. Not that many, but it's got quite a few. But there were lots of people who didn't know what to do with it. And one of the suggestions, one of the more interesting suggestions, was that it was actually going to become possibly Chelsea FC's new home, because as you may know, Stamford Bridge is a very small stadium. They can't make it any larger because of well, the land is owned by, it's quite a long story. We'll talk about that when we get to Chelsea. But there was a suggestion to actually build a stadium in the middle, and obviously keep the 4 iconic chimneys and have the stadium in the middle. That would have actually looked quite cool, and it would have meant that people regularly were inside that every other week, which would have been great. But in the end, it's become another faceless shopping centre and flats.
Now, long-term subscribers to our channel may remember an episode where we talked about the artist Steek, whose work we very much admire, and we spoke about him when we visited Lark, the London Action Resource Centre, in episode 8 of our series on Aldgate. There'll be a link to view that episode in the description below, as well as at the end of this video. Well, as it happens, Steek has been following our channel ever since, and loves Love Your London. And when he found out that we were covering Battersea next, he told us that he was very close to being commissioned to produce a giant stick art piece on one of the chimneys, shortly before its eventual demolition. How awesome would that have looked? Funnily enough, there almost wasn't going to be a power station here at all. In 1907, when this location was a disused waterworks, an American developer was planning to build London's answer to Coney Island's Dreamland. It was going to be called Dream City. It had full approval of the London County Council, and it was scheduled to open in May 1908 with loads of crazy rides and Eskimo settlement, their words, not ours, and a midget village. Spoiler alert, it never happened. Though the plan was almost resuscitated in 1988, when the people behind Alton Towers were very, very close to making a massive theme park here called the Battersea. There was even going to be a service taking people directly from Victoria Station in some sort of futuristic bullet train with LCD screens on the walls to make people think that they were travelling at light speed. Margaret Thatcher officially opened the project by letting off loads of fireworks with a laser, which led to a load of fire engines and ambulances turning up, thinking that there had been some kind of explosion. There's a link to a snippet from Thames News from 1988 that we will leave in the description that you can check out later. But in the end, the developers lost their funding and it never happened.
So we're just going to have a little quick look inside to see what what it looks like. I've not actually been in there since it was redeveloped by Malaysian government. The King of Malaysia actually opened it officially in 2022, and the whole redevelopment cost was £9 billion. That's billion with a B. Let's go and have a little quick look.
So, as I said earlier, some of it has been converted to luxury flats. We're not allowed up there. And we love the exterior, but inside it's just so underwhelming, especially when you consider all the wacky plans that had been made for it, from the theme park to the new Chelsea Stadium, but it's just a shopping mall, basically, with some original features. You can get a lift up to the top on the lift109.co.uk website for an eye-watering £24 for the full lift experience and 360-degree views of London. We asked them if we could get comps or even reduced prices in order to review it for Love Your London, but they said no. Make of that what you want. A lot of the reviews on TripAdvisor are quite scathing. You can go to the top of the Sky Garden, aka the walkie-talkie building, which is 160 metres high, as opposed to the 109 metres that Lift 109 gives you, for absolutely free. We reviewed it, and the link is in the YouTube description. But there is one thing there that is really uber cool. Remember that Hawkwind album cover for Quark Strangeness and Charm? Well, Control Room B is now a cocktail bar, and what a cool location. Now, as everything is in London these days, it's not cheap, but if I'm going to pay over the odds for an expensive cocktail, when you're in a place as cool as this, you kind of don't mind so much. They serve original cocktails, such as this one, in an actual model of the power station. They will set you back £32 for two people. A bottle of fairly ordinary Rioja will set you back £58, so it's a little bit too rich for us, I'm afraid. But hey, what a cool looking place. Just look at all those dials and buttons and everything. Yay.
Yeah, so one of the things that one of the other things that Battersea is famous for, apart from its cats and dogs home, which we'll be talking about in the next episode, so don't forget to subscribe, are its markets. Now it has three markets, well I suppose it really has two, because one of them is in Nine Elms. Markets, yes, but the very first market we're just going to have a look at isn't open at the moment. That's a new Covent Garden Market. The reason it's not open is because it opens really early. Opens till like midnight really, although most of it opens at about 4 AM, and it's closed by 9 a.m. We will be having a very quick look at a market which is kind of known as Vauxhall Market or Nine Elms Market, very briefly in this episode, but in the next episode we'll be visiting the Battersea Boot, which is a really fantastic car boot sale. That's going to be the next episode, but in this episode just going to little talk about New Covent Garden Market and why it's called New Covent Garden Market. As you can probably guess, it replaced the old Covent Garden Market. Now Covent Garden now is all full of trendy bars and tourists and pickpockets, and buskers of course, but it used to be a thriving fruit and veg market, obviously it was in the centre of London. It was easier, like most of the places like Billingsgate and Smithfields and all these other markets. Smithfields will be moved, but they were moved somewhere where the rent is a lot cheaper. But as I said, we will be checking out. There's the New Covent Garden Market. We are going to have a quick look at the Nine Elms. All these people running for. And we're going to look at the Nine Elms Sunday Market, which is open very briefly, open till 2. But this is New Covent Garden Market. So now let's cross over.
I'm just gonna wait a second.
Okay, let's just cross.
It's time for another voiceover. As I was crossing this busy intersection, I managed to unplug my microphone, so though you'll be seeing me moving my lips in some of these scenes, just please ignore them. But it's time for a bit of history. So, where does the name Battersea come from? Well, it's Anglo-Saxon, Battersea Egger, a name which can be dated back to the year 693, when Bishop Earconvold granted the nunnery of St Mary's of Barking, remember that place we visited in our Barking episode, land in and around Battersea Egger, or Battersea Island. This was a very marshy area at the time. There was a stream called the Hidderburn, which later became known as the Hyderburn, and later still, Falcon Brook, often written one word, Falcon Brook, which gave its name to the pub that we'll be visiting in episode 4 of this series. The area just to the west of the Hidderburn was known as Battersea Island, and that's where Battersea comes from. Oh, in the Domesday Book it's listed as Battersea, but since it's spelt with a B in the 7th century and with a B now, I think that the P bit was just a temporary misnomer, and we're pretty sure that it was never named after anyone called Patrick or Patrice. Now here's a cool map on your screen dating from A History of London from 1884. And as you can see, the Falcon Brook is there, as well as Battersea. I, of course, means an island, as in the word that we still have today, 8. So, Batters, or Battrick, had this land between the rivers, on which there was a manor house, which passed on to King Harold II in 1066. But there was a community here long before then, and we'll be talking much more about that when we visit St Mary's Church in episode 3 of this series. But I can tell you that there was actually a church on that same site back in 800 AD. Now, this was a very marshy area, lots and lots of rivers and streams, and around that church and the manor house, over the centuries, the area became famous for its fruit and veg, and its flowers. This place was also synonymous with market gardening, and in fact, back in the 1290s, there's a record of 30 boatloads of manure arriving at Battersea every year. So strip cultivators, using strip farming, which was market gardening based on the Dutch model, really became popular here in the 1600s. In fact, in the 1600s there was a saying, "Go to Battersea to be cut for the simples." Now, you would say that to a simple or foolish person, but it was also a play on words, because the simples was another word for the medicinal herbs that the apothecaries here would cultivate, here in Battersea. People like Hugh Morgan, who is one of the most important apothecaries in Elizabethan England. He lived here in Battersea, and he had a visit garden. Now, there were loads of accounts of local specialties too. Apparently, the best anemones in the country were grown here in the early 1700s, and there was even a species of anemone called the Battersea Red. There's written records of melons being grown here, as well as the Battersea bean, which is a bit like a small kidney bean, and the Battersea cabbage. But the crop most famous here is the asparagus, or asparagus, as it was then known. Huge bundles of asparagus weighing over 30 pounds in weight. In fact, the Battersea Bundles became legendary. And incidentally, there's a pub at the top of Falcon Road called the Asparagus, in honour of this humble vegetable. And you may well just see us there in episode 3. But, so what's all this about New Covent Garden then? Well, Covent Garden, as you know it now, is in central London, that tourist trap full of street performers and overpriced cafes. But it used to be, as I said earlier, a fruit and veg market and a flower market. And it moved here in the 1970s, this being the original site of the old Nine Elms railway station. There is, as I said at the start of this episode, a new Nine Elms railway station, which is part of the Northern Line extension, but it has nothing to do with the one that used to be here. New Covent Garden Market was opened by the Duke of Edinburgh in 1975, and it has thrived ever since. In fact, 75% of London's florists alone come here to buy their flowers. I have no idea whether the famous anemone, the Battersea Red, is one of the flowers available. As for the local Battersea asparagus, I doubt it. There's no room really here for market gardens anymore, unfortunately. It's all high-rise flats and shiny buildings, but we think it's quite befitting that this area was chosen for the relocation. The market caters mainly for the restaurants and the florists, the trade in other words, which is why it's only open at such an ungodly hour. So, as we are not trade, we are instead going to have a little peekaboo at Nine Elms Market. So we're heading this way, where apparently no dogs or alcohol are allowed beyond this point. So it's a huge market. I mean, it really is massive. You can buy anything from hoovers wrapped in cellophane to gaffer tape, belts, underwear, suitcases, colourful dresses, and loads of junk spinning around.
The identical rucksacks and computers?
Yeah.
I wonder what truck those fell off.
But it was just such a lovely day out and really, really hot. Some people even went shirtless. And the market just goes on, and whilst it's great fun, there's nothing really unusual about it, and we like to show you the more unusual side of London, such as this. If you look through the railings on the southwestern side of Nine Elms Market, you can see an NHS health centre, as part of Battersea Field's practice. It's on Coruna Road. However, you can see a little green plaque there on the wall, can't you? Hang on, let me use Google Street View for this little bit. That's because it's where Ramport Studios used to be, which was built by The Who in 1973, who originally wanted to call it The Kitchen, by the way. And The Who built it to record their Quadrophenia album. Now, actually, quite a lot of other people recorded here, from Supertramp to Thin Lizzy. In 1983, Virgin bought it, renamed it Townhouse Studios. It was taken over by EMI, who then sold it in 1996, and now, as you can see, it's a health centre. Now, it's impossible to actually get through this gate, which means that all the people who live on Coruna Road who want to go to the market, which is just 10 minutes away, actually have to walk an entire mile all around the estate. According to Google Maps, it would take 19 minutes, which must be really annoying for the locals. So if there is a cut-through that we're unaware of, please let us know in the comment section.
Okay, yeah, just a little word of advice, because we're absolutely starving it. We've just come out of the market. Almost everywhere is cash only. Now, normally I'm quite like the idea that it's cash only, or having to use your card all the time, but didn't have any money on us. So if you do come to this market, even if you just want like one of those lovely Romanian sausages, you have to use cash. So unfortunately, we're still hungry, but we're just now going to go towards Nine Elms Station, which is the other brand new station. This is the Nine Elms area.
This isn't brand new, that's for sure.
No, that's definitely not brand new. But again, just while we're getting there, I'm just going to explain a little bit about the name Nine Elms. It dates from 1645. Because there were 9 elm trees bordering the main thoroughfare that existed at that time, and in fact that road existed since the 1200s. Now, if you're a Peter Sellers fan, you've probably heard the name before, and that's because there was a fairly saccharine film by Peter Sellers called The Optimists of Nine Elms, and it actually stars, as well as Peter Sellers, it actually stars a really young Keith Chegwin playing the role of Georgie, a little boy. Little fun fact there. Don't think he's credited though.
Someone feeding the birds. Lovely.
Yeah, so as you can see from here on this map, I'm looking for Nine Elms Station. This takes you to Vauxhall Station. Nine Elms Station is not on this map. This map's probably older than 2021. It's really painful because on Google Maps it tells me that to get to Nine Elms Station you just go straight through here, but of course you can't go through here because it's all blocked off. So look, we're going to cheat a little bit, but there are some images you'll see now on your screen of inside Nine Elms Station. We're going to use Google Street View just to show you what it looks like outside, because there's nothing really new to say about Nine Elms Station. It opened on exactly the same day, the 20th of September 2021. It's also in Zone 1. It also is completely accessible, and it has toilets, and they are also completely accessible. So fantastic all round, but it's exactly the same that I told you earlier at the beginning of the episode about Battersea Power Station. Now the next episode we're going to be continuing our trip. We're going to actually be checking out the American Embassy among other things, and also there's going to be cats and dogs and parks and all sorts of interesting things to look forward to. Obviously in the outro of this video you'll see a preview of some of those things, but this is we're going to end this episode. Thank you for watching. Do remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell and become a patron if you want, because we've done a lot. I mean, we've just got 60 pages here of notes. Can't wait to show it all to you. That's the end of this episode. So till next time, bye.
There's a wrench. There's a wrench.
There's a wrench. That's just me settings. Next time on Love Your London, it'll be a longer episode than this one, because we'll be talking about sewage, the Battersea Dogs and Cats home, visiting some cool pubs and bars, talking to some of the stallholders at the Battersea Boot Fair. We'll be talking about Chelsea Bridge and Albert Bridge, and giving you the full history of Battersea Park, which is actually quite fascinating. And what the hell is happening here? Till next time!
From Acton Town to Wimbledon, from Brixton to beyond, love your London, have a banana.